What's up, everybody? It's Coach Dave, and I lift.
And I'm Coach Meg, and I lift.
Welcome
this
to
is She Lifts.
He Lifts podcast. Tonight, I want to officially welcome Coach Meg to the team as our now permanent co-host. And I also want to thank Coach Carol for all the things that she did over the last year or so working with me, bringing in a unique perspective from someone who is a little bit more, we'll say, seasoned, because she hates when I say that she's older than me. But we'll say seasoned and has a different perspective, especially when it comes to nutrition. But with that said, I'm very excited to have Meg, because Meg also brings a very similar perspective for myself in terms of a very pragmatic approach to fitness. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight as we go into our 60th episode. And we're going to talk about things that are out there right now that we are not necessarily on board with. Because one of the things I think I don't like about fitness sometimes is that there are very dogmatic individuals out there that swear this is the way it is. This is the way it is. This is what you should do. If you want to get in shape, if you want to get healthier, this is what you have to do. And I don't think, right. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And there's also a certain amount of what works for you, I think. Okay. And we're going to talk about some of the things that don't necessarily work for us. Some of the things have merit. Okay. And we just don't like them. Some of the things are a little less merity, we'll say. I don't know if that's the right word. But definitely. So let's go ahead and let Meg go ahead and start.
So I am not down with bad diets. Just to name a couple: carnivore diet, which is pretty much all protein. Keto, which is high fats, I think it's no carb.
So low carb, no carb. I mean, it's all in that same.
Just not sustainable. So that's why I'm not on board with them. That's not realistic. So maybe let's say if a client were coming to me and wanted to get ready, needed to lose a X amount of weight in 4 weeks, they were getting ready for a wedding or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Those might work to get you to where you want to be and like extreme weight loss in 4 weeks, but I would never prescribe it because it's not sustainable and it's not healthy. You do that for 4 weeks. If you tested your blood levels before you started and after you started, let's say you were doing keto, your cholesterol is going to be way higher, your blood pressure is going to be way higher, and it's just not that's not worth it to me. To have 4 weeks of intense, weight loss, intense working out, intense dieting, just for you to pick it all back up afterwards, which is even more unhealthy.
So I'm going to say this. I got my fitness journey started with a low carb diet, with the South Beach diet. One of the things, which I still in the pantheon of fad diets, I still think is one of the better ones because it does sort of work you back in a healthy way. And that's what I think a lot of those don't do. Carnivore, keto specifically, they want to preach themselves as a lifestyle, but they're not. Especially keto, because keto is very dependent on your macro split. And if you go off of that macro split, let's say you go to that wedding and you have cake and you have alcohol and you have whatever, suddenly you're knocking your body out of ketosis. And now you have to spend another 3 days getting back into it. So even if you're on that for the long term, like you're constantly in and out. In the short term, again, if you are someone who is very, 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 very overweight, extremely overweight, in the obese category, truly obese category, not the BMI obese category, but truly obese category, and something's going to get you started, I am a fan of it. However, I am with you, and then long term, they are not. Okay, which brings me to my number 5, and that is organic everything. Okay. I'm sure you do, because we were just talking about gut health right before we started recording. And I don't discredit the idea of organic food. I definitely don't. I definitely think there's merit to it. However, I also, going back to what you said about the other things, I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's 100% sustainable for everyone to eat a 100% organic diet 100% of the time. There is definitely some picking and choosing when it comes to organics. There's certain things that I eat that are more organic than others. There's certain things that I eat that are 100% organic. There are certain things, I try to get organic fruits and fresh vegetables whenever I can, but I'm not opposed to buying frozen vegetables. You know,
Yeah,
I'm not opposed to buying frozen fruit. I do stay away from canned fruit. Um, I'll tell you one thing that I eat that it surprises a lot of people, and I actually eat it fairly regularly. Is I do eat deli ham because I put it in with my eggs in the morning a lot of the time because it's quick and it's easy and it's easier than trying to glaze it or roast a ham every other weekend.
right.
So it's what works for you. Again, this goes into the what works for you category. The other thing is not everyone has access to 100% organic food all the time, especially in today's economic climate where it's more expensive.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to mention is that not to make this political at all, but it all wraps into the same
Right.
thing. Never in my life growing up were we ever an organic family or anything, but somewhere like as years went on, more crap was put into our food. FDA regulations were like you can put carcinogens in certain foods and whatever. So that's an issue. Is like more recently, I've eaten a lot of organic food because there is a lot of stuff that's terrible for your body in there. But then there's also the economic part of it where you buy organic, it's $2-3 more
Right.
to buy the same amount of food that's not organic, but you're putting crap in your body.
Right.
I'm not above frozen food. I eat frozen veggies all the time. But there is now, after the election, there is a politician in office now that is going to make America healthy again, where they redo the guidelines of FDA and all of those different like health institutes so that we aren't eating like all of these like, red dyes and everything that's terrible for you.
And I'm not even going so far down the rabbit hole as to get into the red dye stuff. I'm talking on the very surface level. Like people talk about glyphosate in oatmeal. Okay, that's a big one to me. Like you people are trying to change their breakfast cereals that are Fruit Loops, or I always pick on Fruit Loops. I don't know why I always pick on Fruit Loops, but that's what I always pick on. That's full of red dyes and full of high fructose corn syrup. And we go to oatmeal, and then someone will say, invariably tell that person, oh, that's full of pesticides and blah, 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 blah. Well, it's still a better choice for that person coming from the Fruit Loops than it is. And again, the short-term health effects of that, maybe they can work their way down to an organic oatmeal, but the short term are going to be far less or far more immediate and far more positive than those Fruit Loops will. So don't discourage someone from, and this is where again go back to the dogmatic thing, is the people who get on that organic kick is they get so ingrained in it that they stop, they get away from trying to help the people that are making better changes and progressing. Again, progressive overload along the way. That makes sense.
There's also, in terms of like the red dye, never been, and this is with kids specifically. I was just talking to a friend yesterday. She was talking about how much she spends bi-weekly on groceries, and I thought for her family of 3 it was high,
right?
Even with like this economy. But she shops at the organic food stores because her son has ADHD and staying away from the red dyes and certain things that are in like normal kid snacks. It's not in those things, and she sees a huge difference in his behavior when he's eating the organic stuff and everything like that. So that's just a huge thing. But I also think it's interesting that there's so many kids, adults that have ADHD now because of the stuff. I mean, in my opinion, because of the stuff that goes into our food.
Well, that's another issue. We could talk about that at a later stage. But why don't you go ahead and move on to number 4?
Bodybuilding programming for a lifestyle client.
Oof.
So as a trainer, I struggled with this for a long time where I would have clients. I never trained bodybuilders. I was a bodybuilder, but didn't train bodybuilders. I thought that it would take away from my enjoyment of the sport. And I was so used to what I did, the 6-day splits, 7-day splits, whatever, this much rice, this much ground beef, whatever, the boring meals, whatever. That actually works for me as boring meals, but I'm a little, have more variety now. More like right now, my relationship with food is like fantastic. I found that that's what I was having. You know, a client asked me for a program, I would write them one. It was bodybuilder esque.
Mm-hmm.
That never 0% of the time worked long term for any clients. So it might have worked for 2-3 months,
Mm-hmm.
but then they're like, this isn't sustainable for me, or oh, I just fell off the grid. Why? But then I sat with myself and like, why did they fall off the grid with it? Why did they not stick to it? Definitely, client needs to take responsibility for you know stopping their healthy habits and everything like that. But I see where my life is now versus where it was when I was a bodybuilder, and I'm so much less stressed because I don't have to eat on such a regimented diet.
Mm-hmm.
So now when I make programs, it's so much different where I like give options and ideas, and it's not like this much of this much of that. Like I try and honestly stay away from putting like weights and like 100 grams of rice. I try to stay away from that and say like your carb source should be your protein source should be the size of your palm.
Mm-hmm.
Your fat source in a meal should be the size of your thumb.
Right.
And it doesn't work for everything. Like avocado is a fat. You're not going to just have like a thumb-sized piece of avocado. But like if you're thinking of like an oil or something, that's a good like I think to come up with.
That's a good one because I've heard from a lot of trainers, and I'm probably like that, not necessarily in the bodybuilding, but we all draw from our own experience. Okay, and you know, I'm not gonna lie. I came in when I started doing this. I came in a little cocky. First of all, I was that's another issue, but I came in a little cocky because I had lost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
So in my brain, I've got it figured out.
Like you know what to do.
Right. But again, what I do is what I was doing at the time, what I do now is not sustainable. And going back to what you said about having that relationship with food, someone asked me the other day about what I was eating in that moment. I have a wrestling match this Saturday, so what I'm eating these last couple days is not indicative of what I normally eat.
Right.
So I've cut 12 pounds in the last 6 weeks. So that's not my norm. That's not my norm.
Right.
So
that's a purposeful.
Right. So when you start going into a bodybuilder-esque program, and whether not even just bodybuilders, you can whatever your experience is, because I've seen people do it from an athletic perspective. I've seen people do it from a more CrossFit type. Whatever worked for you isn't necessarily going to work for the client, because everybody's life is different.
Yeah.
One of the things I've read recently is stop trying to make your clients into you and make them into them.
Yeah. Well, and that's like with our do work team, that's something special that we have here is like if we had the same client come to us with the same goals, you'd probably write a completely different program than what I would write. Andrew is the bodybuilding esque. He would write something similar to that, and that works for some people. It really does. But that's like
if you've got the time and if you've got the effort and you've got the discipline.
That's the beauty of having so many different styles of trainers on our team is that we have the brochures. You can read which one who's experienced similar things to me, or whose style do I think would fit most with me. If that doesn't work, I'll try somebody else. And it's just back to what you said in the beginning is like there's not just one way to do fitness. There's multiple different ways, and it's just what works for you.
Going on that same, and I'm like how we sort of piggybacking. Partial reps is a big thing. Now, partial reps come in two varieties. One is a short length partial, meaning you go through about half the reps, usually in the highest peak form of tension. Okay, for example, in a bicep curl, you will go from just below your elbow to just above your elbow and crank it fast. The other one is a more recent is long length partials, which start in a stretched range of motion, usually giving you about 3/4 of a full range of motion from a stretched position. My problem with that, especially for a beginner, is that the full range of motion has so many benefits to your joints, your bones, your overall lifestyle. And again, going back to what you said, lifestyle change clients, that unless you are truly your goal is strictly hypertrophy, that doesn't have a place for a beginner. Now, down the road, maybe when we have to bust through a plateau, yes, we can go into a short and length partials or add partial reps as a way to work through failure, to increase hypertrophy, to increase tension on the muscle. but learn the movement before you start diving into, and this goes to a lot of other things, but learn the movement before you start getting fancy. I always put it back to when you were a kid and you played sports. You played sports, so you remember this. Did you ever like go and you're watching, I don't know, basketball, soccer or something, and you saw somebody do some sort of crazy trick shot behind the back, and the next day in practice, everybody's trying to duplicate that, do that. We're still learning to dribble. Like, I can't even shoot a free throw. Why am I going to try to do a double reverse dunk? You know, like, I can't even shoot a free throw. So learn the fundamentals before you start moving into the.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I love partial reps,
Mm-hmm.
but again, I wouldn't have the general fitness person that is a beginner come in and start right away with partial reps because they don't even know what a full rep is
Right.
yet. However, I do have a lot of, and this goes into what's put in our food, because I think a lot of what has been put in our food has caused a lot of autoimmune diseases and a bunch of just not good things in clients that we're dealing with. So I have a specific client, she has Hashimoto's, and I'm not saying that's 100% due to what's put in our food, but she has a gluten intolerance, part of Hashimoto's. She's very sensitive to certain foods. She's very sensitive to high intensity workouts. So for a while, she like routinely gets her blood work done just to make sure she's in range. She does have an autoimmune disease, so she needs going to make sure everything is fine regularly. So she was doing great, no inflammation. She was getting progress. She was gaining muscle, burning fat, and then out of nowhere, we couldn't quite figure out, pinpoint something, a trigger that caused a ton of inflammation. Like her weight went up 10 pounds. She looked inflamed. She was weaker, and we couldn't quite figure it out. So she went back to her like balls to the wall, like gluten free this, dairy free this, whatever. And her naturally, because of her autoimmune disease, workouts had to be modified to not heavy. So she was in a phase of gaining muscle, whatever. We had to tone that back a little bit, and partial reps were like her best friend because she is very active and very strong, and she's not elite, but she's not a beginner by any means. So I had to, and this is what works for her, is like the lower weight, higher rep, time under tension, partial reps workouts is what works for her. She does them twice a week. Other than that, she does a lot of lower impact stuff. She'll go on long runs. We're actually friends outside of business, but we'll go for long runs, and she just does those two workouts with me throughout the week, and then other than that, she'll do long walks or whatever just to give her body time to recover. But if she were to go to like the 8 to 10 reps, inflammation is like.
I agree, and I think that is where find what works for you, for the person, and not what works for you, and not what the latest fad is.
Having an educated and I'm in place for everything.
Meg, on to you.
Ozempic, semaglutide, which is like massive right now. It's a huge trend right now. On the surface, I'm totally against it. I think it's nuts that a medication that is for diabetic patients. My grandfather's a diabetic patient. It was a shortage at one point, and I was very nervous that like because of all these people that just want to look skinny or lose weight, the easy way would make that come into a shortage for my grandfather, who actually needs it to control his insulin.
Okay.
But I did like talk to a lot of people because I had clients coming in that were on it, letting me know whatever. I'm not here to judge you. That's your call. That's your decision. I'm not super educated on it. I can give you the education that I know, but it's going to steer you away from it. That's on whatever provider you're getting it from to inform you on like what the side effects are and whatever. I do, because I am from a bodybuilding background. I competed natural, but I've been to shows that aren't natural. People are on steroids. You also can't be on a steroid. There's like the general dude that would work out at Gold's would be on steroids but not competing, and I think that's nuts.
Well,
like
that's almost another issue, but
But then I compared it to how is that different than Ozempic? Because I have seen a lot of people use that as an aid or like a supplement just to get them on a kickstart to lose weight, but actually did change their lifestyle. I'm not on board with, which is similar to steroids. Like you can't take a steroid and just be this like jacked dude. Like
you still have to put in the work.
You have to eat right. You have to do all that stuff. It just helps a little bit. It's a little bit of a boost. So I can see it from that perspective. If you're changing your lifestyle, if you're still going out and drinking and just being a complete a-hole about like your routine and lifestyle, but also taking this, you're going to gain it back after you get off of it.
So I have a client that started with me and then started, and he was extremely extremely overweight. I'm with you on the kickstart part of it. The other part is I've done some research. I've done quite a bit of research on it, and one of the things that I have found in the research is not only does it change your eating habits because it changes your appetite, but when you come off of it, yes, there is some diet rebound, but you only gain about 15% of the weight back, and your taste buds generally, at least in the short shift. So if you are a person with a huge sweet tooth, suddenly that sweet tooth is very diminished coming off of it. Yeah, I've found that out. So again, what's going to work for you? And again, taking the easy way out, I don't necessarily know that it's the easy way out. It is. We want, it's easy for us to say, and this is going to sort of pop into my next one. For us it was, especially for someone like me who did do it the hard way. But at the same time, I have to put myself in 270-pound Dave's mindset, and someone said, "Here, take this." If I had done that, I'm not saying I wouldn't have done that. Like, because at that time, if you told me at 270 pounds where I am now and this is where you're going to get to, I would have probably not been here, because I would have said, there ain't no way. Right. So would that have dissuaded me from putting in the hard work? I don't know, but it would definitely have made knowing the journey a little easier. Yeah. So take a look at the research. That is one of those things that I'm not necessarily for. I'm not for everybody. I'm especially not for it for someone who needs to lose at least less than 50 pounds.
There are some providers, the more reputable ones, will track via in-body scans. Like, it's required for you to be on their like Ozempic program or whatever. It's required of you to do an in-body scan every so often, just to make sure that you're not losing.
You just lose a lot of muscle. Yep.
With it, so just make sure you're not losing too much muscle. They don't want stick figures walking around endorsing.
Right, healthy people. Well, and that is going to go, and I'm glad you brought up about the easy way, the quite easy way out, because one of the things that I've said, and this is going to go into my number 4, is what is quote unquote the morning routine has been called, which has merit, but again, and this is one of those have merits, but I'm not 100% on board with. And I'll explain why. So the morning routine, there are different variants, but usually it's get up, take a 5-minute cold shower, read 10 pages, get sunlight, exercise, all before 8 a.m. Usually it involves getting up at like 5 a.m. and doing a bunch of tasks. Journal. Journaling is in some of them, writing down what you're grateful for. First of all, why does that have to be done first thing in the morning? Like, why can't you just incorporate all of that stuff into your day? Secondly, and I'll get to the cold showers in a minute, I ain't doing that. But the biggest thing is, I understand that this is not easy. I understand that fitness takes dedication, and it takes a healthy mindset, and I get it. But we don't have to make it intentionally hard. Okay? We don't, just because it's, and I get there's a certain amount of satisfaction in achieving something hard, but my biggest issue with the morning routine is, first of all, us. Let's take us. You and I are in the gym at 5:30 in the morning. Okay? Does that mean we have to get up at 4? Right. No, we don't have time for that shit in the morning, especially if we're trying to be healthy and get our 7 to 8 hours of sleep and do all of that kind of stuff. So it doesn't have to be this first thing in the morning. I get the idea if you were working a 9 to 5-esque job. I get the idea of it, and I get the mindset behind it. But again, to going back into that dogmatic approach to everything, that's not the only way to work. If it works for you, great. I'm not saying it has no merit, because it does. Having that great mindset and all those things. But let's come on.
I'm more towards that side with the morning routine. Like I'm in here. I have to be ready to go at 5:30. I'm not getting up any earlier than what I already do to do all of these things. But also in terms of like the 75 hard, I think a lot of people do it. I've seen a ton of people with success with it. And I think it's to prove that you can do hard things, you can have discipline and whatever. But right at those 75 days, you don't do it anymore.
Right.
And you don't stick to it because it was so hard. The reason, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with anybody that tries that. If you need to prove that to yourself, that's 100% fine, to make sure you're doing it for you. I've gone through 3 bodybuilding preps. I don't need to prove myself that I can do hard things because that was hard enough.
Right.
I'm also not taking a cold shower in the morning. That's just one thing. It just doesn't sound fun for me.
No, and again, I'm gonna, as we're gonna wrap this up, I'm gonna talk about the cold plunge, because that's another one that I'm just not on board with. It does have, there are some merits. I don't think some of the merits are over exaggerated, but the idea of cold water immersion sucks to me.
Yeah, it
like
does suck.
I hate the cold.
I do reap benefits from doing it when I need recovery. I will say that. So I'll do it. Right now, I'll probably do it like once a month, but at one point I was doing it once a week. Then I'll sleep great, I'll recover well. So I do see the advantages of it, but I don't do it on a consistent basis. More so like when I need to.
Right, and I think, and again, that sort of where I'm going to wrap this all up today is, what works for us doesn't work for everybody. Right. What works for you doesn't work for me. What works for me doesn't work for you, and what works for you doesn't work for Matt. And what works for Matt doesn't work for me. And Matt and I have talked about it specifically about nutrition, how I cannot not eat like him.
He's got weird taste buds. He doesn't like much. That's why he's so.
And
he'll tell you that.
Right.
He said he's blessed that he has weird taste buds because it's easy for him to.
Right. So again, find what's going to work for you, and I encourage you to do your research, just like Meg has done on the Ozempic, just like I've done on the cold plunge and on organics. Find what's going to work what's going to fit into your lifestyle and fit in your balance. Make small changes and find a way to do it together. That's all we have for this week. I want you to thank Coach Meg, and I'm very excited to have her on this team, and very excited to be part of and filming here in the Do Work Factory. I want to join us next week. We are going to have a special guest. I'm going to have a registered dietitian, and we're going to talk about some things like seed oils, artificial sweeteners, non-nutritive sweeteners, and specifically one of my favorite topics, some of the misinformation slash fear-mongering information out there on Instagram Reels that I just drives me nuts. So until next week, check out Meg at Beeline Fitness on Instagram. Check me out, DWebster023 on Instagram. Check us both out at thedoworkfactory.com. And until next week.